Hello, and welcome to the 2018 King County Count Us In Point-in-Time Count training. Thank you for joining us in this important effort to improve the understanding of homelessness in King County. The count will be conducted in two primary phases, separating the count and survey efforts. We will share additional details regarding the methodology as the training continues. If you participated in the 2017 Count Us In effort, you will notice that the 2018 count will be conducted in a similar fashion. If you did not participate in 2017, but did participate in previous count efforts, you will see that the methods have changed. If you are brand new to the count, welcome. We are excited to have you join us. In this training, we will cover the following: the purpose of the point-in-time count, what you can expect on the day of the count, how to conduct the count, and reminders and next steps. There are several reasons why King County conducts a yearly point-in-time count. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, requires all communities that receive federal funding for homeless services to conduct a point-in-time count, or a PIT count, of all persons experiencing homelessness during the last 10 days of January. Counts of people who are unsheltered, which means living outdoors, in vehicles, tents, or other similar locations, are currently required every other year. However, King County chooses to count the population every year in order to better inform local and statewide responses to homelessness by using the most current data possible. The results of Count Us In help King County to increase the community's understanding of homelessness, to retain and improve funding for homeless services, and to meet federal data reporting requirements. The count is the only data source we currently have for understanding both the number and characteristics of people experiencing homelessness who are not in shelters or connected to services. It is one of the most powerful tools we have in linking data to national and local planning efforts to end homelessness. This figure shows the different components that Count Us In includes to make sure all people experiencing homelessness in King County are represented in the count. You will be participating in the general street count, which is highlighted in the middle box on this slide. The general street count is a visual count of people who are currently unsheltered and will take place during the very early morning hours of Friday, January 26th, before people begin moving through their day and before people staying in shelters leave the facility. Timing and coordination are important to avoid duplication, so areas surrounding shelter locations should be counted first. Rural regions and non-shelter areas may also be subject to special arrangements. We will discuss how your team should prioritize counting locations within your assigned count area, such as shelters, later in this presentation. The other components of Count Us In include the shelter count, the youth count, and the survey. The shelter count collects information on the number of people staying in a shelter program across King County during the night of January 25th. The youth count, which focuses on counting unaccompanied young people under the age of 25 who are experiencing homelessness, will take place during the afternoon and evening hours of January 25th. Finally, the survey component is conducted in the 2 to 3 weeks immediately following the general street count. Surveys are conducted with a representative sample of people experiencing homelessness across King County and provide us with a better understanding of what homelessness looks like in the region, including information on veterans, families with children, and people experiencing long-term homelessness. The PIT count is one of many different strategies the federal government uses to understand homelessness and to allocate funding for services. By focusing on a specific population with specific needs during the PIT count, we can help improve the resources available and promote a greater understanding of the issue while working toward ending homelessness for all populations. The definition of those experiencing unsheltered homelessness used for the PIT count is limited, but it is as follows: individuals and families with a primary nighttime residence that is a public or private place not designated for or ordinarily used as a regular sleeping accommodation for human beings. Here are some examples of what may be included and what is not included in the definition of homelessness used for the count. Although the people listed as quote-unquote not included are precariously housed or otherwise at risk of being unsheltered, the HUD definition does not include them for the purposes of this count. HUD considers individuals living in the following locations to be experiencing homelessness for the point-in-time count: in tents, makeshift shelters, on streets, in vehicles, parks, abandoned buildings, bus or train stations, airports, or camping grounds. HUD does not consider individuals living in these locations to meet the point-in-time count definition of homelessness. Couch surfers, double-ups, rehabilitation or mental health facilities, jails, prisons, or someone awaiting eviction or foreclosure. There are two different types of participants on each team during the general street count: volunteers and guides. This slide outlines the differences between guides and volunteers. A guide is an individual who has previously or is currently experiencing homelessness and uses their knowledge to identify individuals experiencing homelessness during the general street count. They will guide their team towards locations in their assigned count area where individuals experiencing homelessness are likely to be seen and will help distinguish between safe and potentially dangerous situations. Guides are compensated for their time and contributions to the count in the form of a $15 an hour cash stipend. A volunteer will provide consultation and support in team decisions. They will be in charge of transporting their count team through their assignment and will help ensure that full coverage of the map is achieved. Please note that volunteers are not paid for their participation in the count, nor do they receive gas or mileage reimbursement. Teams should note that because we are covering the entire geography of King County, there may be instances where the guide is not personally knowledgeable about the specific route the team is covering. However, guides are still able to draw on their firsthand experience of homelessness to help identify potential locations or persons based on previous experiences and signs in the environment. All team members are in charge of ensuring the methodology is being followed and should designate one team member to be in charge of marking the tally sheet and one team member responsible for tracking the team's coverage of their count area. On the morning of Count Us In, you will arrive at the deployment center you signed up for or were otherwise assigned to. Here are some examples of what a deployment center might look like, which will include sign-in tables for when you first arrive, coffee or other refreshments, and checkout tables for when your team is ready to deploy. Here you can see what to expect on the morning of the count. Guides and volunteers will arrive at 2 a.m., and the goal is to have you out the door and in the field as soon as possible so that your team has adequate time to cover your route. When you arrive that morning, you will first sign in with the deployment center captain and sign a hold harmless agreement. When everyone has arrived, we will do a brief training to review the data collection methods and safety protocols, and then create teams of volunteers and guides. We will go into detail about how these teams are created on the next slide. Once the teams are created, each team will be given their maps and tally sheets. Before leaving the deployment center, each team must check out with the deployment center captain so that we know which team is covering what maps and we can keep track of who is out in the field. We will also collect your team's contact information and give you the phone number of the deployment center captain so that you can contact them with any questions you may have while out in the field. When you have completed your count assignment, your team must return to the deployment center and check in with the deployment center captain. This is when we will collect and review your data, ensure everything is correctly recorded, and clarify with your team if there are any inconsistencies or questions. Upon completing the check-in process, guides will receive payment for their time spent in the field, as well as their time spent attending an in-person training session. We expect all teams to return to the deployment center by 6 a.m. You may come back before that if you finish your map areas early. Please call us if you think you need to be out any later than 6 a.m. or if you need additional help to complete your assignment. We strongly encourage you to conduct as thorough of a count of your assigned maps as you can. Here you can see how we will create our teams on the morning of the count. This process requires volunteers and guides to wait for their team assignment before deploying into the field, and we greatly appreciate your patience, flexibility, and cooperation during this time. The deployment center captain will match up 2 to 3 volunteers with a guide with lived experience of homelessness and will then assign each team 2 to 3 maps to cover on their route. We will try our best to send you to areas that you are familiar with, but please remember that we are responsible for covering the entire county, and you may be sent to an area that you do not know as well. Your team might also be assigned to an area where you will see very few or 0 persons experiencing homelessness. This data is very helpful to us, and it is important that we cover every area to ensure we are not making any assumptions about where individuals experiencing homelessness are in King County, and to ensure that we conduct the most accurate and robust count possible. Please also be mindful that depending on how many volunteers and guides show up on the day of the count and the number of count areas that need to be covered, We may ask larger groups of volunteers to split into smaller groups to ensure a complete count. While we will make an effort to assign larger volunteer groups to areas that are next to each other, we may not be able to accommodate all requests, and we appreciate your understanding and cooperation. As a reminder, volunteers will not be paid for their time, nor will volunteers be reimbursed for their mileage. Guides, who are individuals who have previously or are currently experiencing homelessness, will be paid a cash stipend upon completion of their count route. This stipend includes $15 for attending an in-person training session the week before the count and $15 per hour spent working on count day. All guides are expected to attend an in-person training session the week before the count and will be provided with a 2018 Pit Count referral card and training attendance card at their training. Guides will need to show this card to the deployment center captain after their team returns from the field in order to receive payment for attending training. All payments will be made by the deployment center captain after teams return to the deployment center on the day of the count. The general street count is a visual count of people residing on the streets, in parks and open spaces, in tents, in vehicles, in abandoned buildings, or in makeshift shelters constructed of tarps, cardboard, or other materials. A visual count means that during the count, teams do not talk to or otherwise initiate interactions with people experiencing homelessness. It is important to respect the people we see while in the field and not attempt to awake, question, or otherwise disturb them. This includes not shining flashlights on people or into tents or vehicles, and not seeking to enter structures or vehicles where people may be sleeping or to talk to occupants. Instead, teams will use their collective expertise and best judgment to determine whether to include people or structures observed as part of the tally. This ensures teams are able to efficiently and safely cover the entire geography of King County during the hours of the count, while not infringing upon the personal space of people in the community. This is a sample of a map that you might receive. Each map represents a census tract. The boundaries of census tracts are determined by the U.S. Census Bureau and are based on population density. We use the census tracts as a way to organize the count. Depending on the size of the map area, it is possible that you will receive more than one map. It is important that you keep track of which tally sheets go with which map, which will be indicated by a number at the top of both the tally sheet and the map. You will need to cover all accessible areas of the map. This means canvassing every street. The area your team needs to cover is outlined with a red border. It is important that you stay within this boundary and do not count anyone outside of the defined area. You might also notice different colors shaded on your map. Each of these colors represents a different jurisdictional area of King County, and each will have their own unique tally sheet. Within the border, you can see blue areas, brown areas, and a white area. You will need to record your data on the corresponding tally sheet. This helps us to ensure that a person is only counted in the jurisdiction in which they were observed. Your map might include other features, including shelter or emergency room locations, or areas that have been blacked out or redacted. If your map includes areas that are blacked out, your team will be instructed not to cover that portion of your map, as it has been assigned to special outreach teams who are more familiar with the area and its residents. Here are some tips for how to cover a census tract map. Drive or walk down every street, but do not enter private property. Count on both sides of the street, unless it's a tract border, and then only count on the side of your tract. Look for open areas. It's possible you'll need to get out and walk. Your team should decide the best route to take, which may depend on traffic or where shelters are. It is a good idea to cover areas around shelters first, which will be highlighted on your map if your area contains a shelter. If you are assigned to two maps that share a border, be sure to outline a route that will easily take you from one map to the other. Be aware of the map number and the jurisdictional boundaries, which are indicated by different colors marked on your maps. Put an X on the map for every street and open area you've covered so far, so you don't count along it twice. This is what a tally sheet looks like. At the top, you can see many boxes, but the only two you will need to look for are jurisdiction and map. These will be filled in when you get them, and they will correspond with your team's census tract maps. It's important to check that both the map code and the jurisdiction on the tally sheet match with the map you are covering before you record your data. As mentioned in the previous slide, Your team will have a tally sheet for each jurisdiction, which are marked by different colors on your map. Be sure to pay attention to where you are on the map and use the correct tally sheet for that area. As you move along your route, be sure to check the map. Ensure that you have not gone outside the boundaries of one jurisdiction into another without switching tally sheets, and that you have not crossed the red border line. Once again, it is extremely important that your group records the data on the correct tally sheet for the correct jurisdiction and map. We will provide tally sheets for each of the colored areas on your map, so please be aware of where you see the individuals you are counting, and please mark them on the correct tally sheet. We will review this again on the morning of the count when you have your maps in hand. It is possible that you will have only one color, but it's also possible that you could have 2 or 3 different colors. Let's look at some examples of how to fill out the tally sheets. You will fill out one line per person that you see. In the first example, if you observed one individual who appeared to be in their 30s and was on the street, under age you would bubble in 25 through 59, and under dwelling or vehicle type you would bubble in street. In the next example, if you observed a family of 3 that included 2 adults over the age of 25 and 1 child under the age of 18 on the street, you would fill in one line per person in the family, and then fill in the bubble under the column that says family. Upon tallying each individual, we ask that you also draw a circle around the family bubbles to indicate that these individuals are part of one family. You would also bubble in street under dwelling or vehicle type for each individual. Please note that for the purposes of the count, a family is defined as one adult present with a child under the age of 18. An encampment is defined as 3 or more tents or makeshift shelters that are grouped together. Here are 2 examples of encampments that you may see on your route. The first is an example of an encampment that you are more likely to be asked to enumerate. Larger encampments like the one on the right will most often be blacked out on the maps. These larger encampments will be covered by encampment residents and outreach teams familiar with the location and encampment residents. The first example uses the situation shown in the left-hand picture from the previous slide. This encampment includes 3 tents which look inhabited and 1 single individual. There are other items covered by tarps, but they do not look inhabited. Therefore, you would mark 3 tents in lines 1, 2, and 3, and you would also fill in the 3 encampment bubbles. You would then draw a circle around the bubbles you filled in under the encampment column to indicate that these are part of the same encampment, similar to how you indicate individuals are part of the same family. The middle tent, tallied in line 2, had an individual standing next to it. In this case, you would also complete the tally with the information on that person based on your observation, an adult between the ages of 25 and 59. Again, this is a visual count only, and it is important to maintain a respectful distance even if no persons are directly observed. If you don't actually see individuals outside of their tents or structures, or it is otherwise unclear, you will leave the age field empty and only fill in the bubbles for tent. Once again, you will circle the encampment columns to indicate which tents are part of the same encampment. For encampments where the number of residents is unknown, we will estimate the number of persons residing in these encampments based on the responses to the survey that will be administered in the weeks immediately following the general street count. It is important to note that some maps will have areas that are blacked out. These areas may include encampments, and they will be covered by special outreach teams familiar with these encampments and their residents. Listed here are some ways to identify vehicles that are housing individuals. We want to maintain a respectful distance, so please do not walk up and look inside the vehicle, knock on vehicle doors or windows, or shine flashlights into the vehicle. Instead, here are some signs to look for that can indicate whether somebody is living inside the vehicle or not. A vehicle with windows that are fogged, partially open, or blocked, electrical connections or generators, screens or window coverings, items inside and outside of the vehicle, including household items, bags, clothing, or what may appear to be refuse, sounds of music or talking coming from inside the vehicle, and or that the vehicle is in a known safe parking location, which may be designated on your map. If you find a car or RV or van that looks inhabited based on the signs detailed on the previous slide, but you cannot determine how many persons are residing in the vehicle, please record only the vehicle type, leaving the fields of age and family blank. The example on this slide features a scenario your team might encounter: a vehicle whose windows are covered with belongings on the outside of the vehicle. In this case, you would bubble in car under dwelling or vehicle type. Additionally, we ask that you record the last 4 digits of the license plate of each vehicle that you include in the count. The reason we request that you document the last 4 digits of the license plate number is to help us avoid count duplication. Vehicles move quickly, and this helps ensure vehicles are not counted twice. The field for listing the last 4 digits of the license plate number is located on the front side under dwelling or vehicle type. Please note that the license plate numbers listed here do not belong to the vehicle pictured and are provided only for the purposes of this training. We take the privacy and confidentiality of people experiencing homelessness seriously. Please note that the vehicles are not traceable or able to be tracked down using these numbers. Additionally, these numbers are only for use by the research consultant team from Applied Survey Research and will not be shared with any persons, organizations, or authorities outside of ASR. Safety is a top priority while out in the field. Please take note of the following items when you are out conducting the count. Please be safe and do not take any risks. Do not approach individuals and ask them if they are experiencing homelessness. Please observe and tally only. Stay with your teammates. Be respectful of those you are counting. If you have any problems or questions, call your deployment center captain. If you have a true emergency, please call 911 and then notify your deployment center captain when appropriate. Please do not take any photos while out in the field. Once again, safety comes first for all count participants. If an area seems too unsafe to cover, do not enter it. Mark the area on your map to show your deployment center captain when you return. Some of these areas will have special teams to cover them. Please do not advertise your count location and be sure to keep all information confidential after the count. We will review safety protocols again on the day of the count. Here are a few tips on how to prepare for the count. Wear comfortable shoes and clothing. Dress warmly. Wear a jacket or sweatshirt or raincoat, gloves, hat, etc. Bring a car if possible. Bring a fully charged cell phone. Bring a flashlight. The count will happen rain, snow, or shine, so be sure to bring an umbrella or cold weather gear if necessary. And of course, be sure to get plenty of rest the night before. We will be in touch with you regarding any specific deployment location information, as well as reminders as we approach the day of the count. Please feel free to contact us at the listed email with any questions you may have. Thank you in advance for your participation in the 2018 Count Us in King County. Please encourage your friends, family, and colleagues to join us this January by directing them to the volunteer registration link listed here. We couldn't do this without you, and we look forward to seeing you on January 26th.